Creamy potato soup? Yes please. Now this recipe is awesome for a number of reasons, but one of the things I like most about this recipe is you don't need a whole lot of ingredients to make this recipe. In fact, you probably have 90% of the stuff, if not all of it, in your kitchen already. To get started, we're going to need one medium sweet yellow onion with a small to medium dice on that onion. Then we're going to add that onion to a bowl, and that's pretty much the only veggie we're going to have to prep. See, super easy. Unless you count the garlic, but there's really not much to that. We're just going to peel it and then we're just going to crush it later. Next up on the prep list, we have some thick cut smoked bacon. Now, regular bacon will work fine if you don't have the thick cut. Now, we're going to need about 6 slices of that bacon, and basically all we're going to do is cut it into little tiny pieces. With your bacon cut, you can set that to the side for now. We only got a few more things to do. This recipe actually comes together pretty quick. Now, let's talk about potatoes. I got 2.5 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes. Now, Yukon Gold potatoes, they're not too starchy, not too waxy. They have a nice buttery taste and a nice creamy texture when you mash them, which is why they're also good for mashed potatoes. But today we're going to be using them in our potato soup. So first order of business is peeling all of your potatoes. A little time consuming, but this is probably the part in the recipe that's going to take up the most time, honestly. Next, we are going to cut our potatoes into some nice sized chunks, and you want roughly all the same sizes so that they cook evenly. Also, you want a nice bite-sized piece. I wouldn't cut them too small and I wouldn't cut them too big, because later we are going to blend half of our soup. So the half that's not blended, those potatoes, whatever size they are, that's the size they're going to be in your finished soup. So I'd make them not too small, but not too big. Then we are going to add our potatoes to a bowl full of cold water. Take those over to the sink and wash them a couple of times until that water is clear. Over at the stove, we got our trusty heavy bottom pot over medium heat. Once it's nice and hot, we're going to add our bacon, take our wooden spoon and start breaking apart those pieces that are all sticking together. And we're going to continue cooking our bacon for about 5 to 7 minutes until it is nice and crispy, golden brown. At this point, you can remove your bacon to some paper towels to dry. Now, it's okay if you want to snack on a few of these pieces. It's totally acceptable. However, some of them we are going to save a little bit for our topping, for our garnish later when our soup is done, but most of it is going to go back into the soup later on. Now, as you can see, you're going to have a lot of bacon grease left in your pan. I'm not going to tell you what to do. However, I am going to drain a good bit of this off, about 90% of it. With most of my bacon grease drained and my pan back over medium heat, I'm adding about 3 tablespoons of butter. And once our butter is mostly melted, I'm adding in our chopped onions, and we're going to start cooking these onions down about 5 minutes. Now we're going to add a whole bunch of seasonings later on, so I'm not going to add too much right now. However, I'm just going to add in some cracked black pepper, and I'm not adding salt because we're going to have plenty saltiness from the bacon, and we still have some of that bacon grease left in there too, so I'm just going to add the pepper right now. Mix in that pepper, and we're going to continue sweating these onions down, like I said, about 5 minutes. Once our onions are nice golden brown and smelling amazing, we are going to crush in that garlic, stir that up and cook that for about a minute. Then we're adding in 1/3 cup of flour, stir that in and cook that for about a minute. And I just want to point out that the full recipe, description, and amounts will be in the description below. If you're liking the video so far, give me a thumbs up. And if you're new around here or not, be sure to subscribe. Then we're adding in 4 cups of chicken broth, 2 cups of whole milk, 2/3 cup of heavy cream, and a blend of spices, which will also be in the description below. Give everything a stir to combine. Then we're adding in our potatoes. We're bringing this to a boil, and then we're going to boil this for about 10 to 15 minutes until those potatoes are fork tender. Next, you're either going to need a blender or an immersion blender like this. If you're using a blender, you're going to want to remove it from the heat, maybe let it cool down for a few minutes. Then carefully, working in batches if you have to, you're going to want to remove about half of it, about 5 cups of your soup. Add that to your blender, carefully blend it on low speed until it is nice and smooth, then add it back to your soup. If you're using the immersion blender like I am, you're going to want to eyeball it and carefully blend about half of your soup. Once your soup is blended, turn off the heat. We're going to add the remaining of our bacon bits, and we're going to mix in 2/3 cup of sour cream. Give that all a mix, make sure everything is all well combined. Then after everything is all well combined, put your heat back on low and let this simmer gently for about 10 minutes. After that 10 minutes is up, I want you to kill the heat completely, remove your soup from the heat and let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes. This is going to give that soup time to thicken up. It's going to make everything come together and it's going to be beautiful. After that, our soup is ready to serve. I'm going to do a sprinkle of some sharp cheddar cheese and some Vermont white cheddar cheese. Some of our chopped bacon that we cooked before that you hopefully set aside. A nice little dollop of some whipped cream. And lastly, a sprinkle of some freshly chopped chives. And that's it. Our potato soup is done, ready to serve, ready to be eaten, ready to do whatever you want to do with it, honestly. All things considered, this is probably one of the best soups I've ever made. Truly delicious, scrumptious. It looked amazing. It tastes even better than it looks. I'm definitely going to be making this again. All right, everyone, that's it for me. That's it for this video. That's it from me in this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and I'll see you in the next video. And I just want to say how much I appreciate all of you for watching. Thanks a lot. Let me tell you about one of my favorite meals. Rich, decadent, indulgent, savory. It's this ultimate cottage pie. Not to be confused with a shepherd's pie. This is a cottage pie, and this got 3 types of meat: beef, veal, and pork. Stick around and I'll show you how we make it. First thing we're going to do is make our garlic and chive mashed potatoes. Here I got about 2 pounds of russet potatoes. Now for mashed potatoes, I find the best potatoes is either going to be a russet potato or a Yukon Gold potato. Either way, you can't go wrong. I got a bowl full of cold water to place my potatoes in after we dice them, and I got a separate bowl to skin my potatoes into. And that's simply what we're doing first, is peeling the potatoes. Now if you had, let's say, a potato ricer, you could just boil these whole with the skin on and then just twist and peel the skin off later. Pop the whole thing into the potato ricer and smash it out. I do not have a potato ricer, so this is what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to start by peeling the potatoes until we got a nice smooth skinless potato, and we're going to cut our potatoes into mostly even chunks so that they can cook evenly. And we're adding our chopped potatoes to our bowl full of cold water as we chop them. And once you're done chopping your potatoes, you can see this bowl is full of starchy water. So to remove some of that starch, we're going to go ahead and rinse these potatoes a couple of times until that water is clear. I added my potatoes to a medium saucepan filled with fresh new cold water, and now we're going to add some things. First up, I'm going to add some dehydrated onions for a little bit of flavor, about a tablespoon. Then I'm adding a couple of bay leaves, a generous amount of kosher salt, and some cracked black pepper, about a tablespoon of each. Then I'm adding 2 cloves of garlic. Bring your potatoes to a boil. Cook for about 20 minutes until fork tender. Once your potatoes are fork tender, drain them. Then we're adding them to a large bowl to make mashing them a little bit easier. And the secret to a good mashed, plenty of butter and salt, but mostly butter. Now for this quantity of potatoes, I'm going to add about 1 stick of butter, which is about 8 tablespoons or half of cup. Now you might say that's a lot. You're right. If you say that's too much, you're wrong. Now, because I don't have a potato ricer and you might not either, the next best thing to get smooth potatoes is going to be this hand mixer. So to start, we're going to break up those potatoes, get that butter mixed in, but we're not done yet. We're going to add about a teaspoon of kosher salt and a teaspoon of cracked black pepper. That's just to start. We're going to taste it when we're done. If it needs more seasoning, we're going to add more seasoning. I've also had about a cup of milk heating on the stove. We're only going to add about a half a cup right now. Mix that in. If we need more of the milk, we'll add more of the milk. After a little bit of a mix, I am going to add about another 1/4 cup of our warm milk. Now, mashed potatoes is kind of like the perfect date. Everybody's going to have a preference. Do you like yours thick and stiff, smooth and creamy, loose and runny? But to truly know what's good, you got to get down and taste it. Mine needed just a touch more of seasoning. I'm adding a little bit more kosher salt, a little bit more cracked black pepper, and just a little bit, about 2 tablespoons of our warm milk. Another quick little mix. Then I'm adding in about a handful of chives, and I'm going to gently fold that into our mashed potatoes. And there you go. That's our garlic and chive mashed potatoes. 1 bite and it's incredible. Creamy, salty, buttery, nice garlic and chive flavor is perfect. Next, we're going to prep the vegetables that we need for our filling. First up, a nice large sweet yellow onion, 2 to 3 stalks of some fresh celery, washed and dried, 2 medium carrots, which we are going to peel, wash, and trim. Now, pretty much all of our vegetables are going to get a nice small dice on them. Add them to a bowl. Now, both our celery and our carrots, I'm going to julienne before turning them sideways and then giving them a nice small dice, which you don't have to do. It won't affect the taste at all. It's merely there for aesthetics or for a nice presentation at the end of the dish. And that's it for our fresh prepped vegetables. Now let's talk about our meat. Our shepherd's pie is usually made with minced lamb. Well, not usually, always. And a cottage pie is usually made with beef. I am going to use a mix of beef, pork, and veal, whatever you decide to use. For this recipe, you're going to need 2 pounds of minced or ground meat. We're going to add our meat to a nice hot skillet or Dutch oven or a cast iron skillet. We're going to season our meat with some salt, pepper, paprika, but whatever you cook your meat in. I hope you have enough hindsight, unlike me, to cook your meat in a skillet that's big enough. Anyway, I'm going to push through and continue crumbling and browning this meat. Once our meat is all brown and crumbled, you will notice there is quite a bit of fat. I'm going to drain off all of this meat. I'm going to remove the meat and then drain all the fat. In our same pan over medium heat, I kept a little bit of that fat and I added a little bit more olive oil. I'm going to add in our vegetables, our celery, carrots, and onions, a little bit more seasonings, kosher salt, and black pepper. And we're going to cook down these vegetables for about 5 minutes until they're nice and soft. Now you might have noticed I switched pans. That's because next we are adding our meat back to our cooked vegetables. We're mixing our meat in, then we're crushing in some garlic. Mix in your garlic and let that cook for about a minute until nice and fragrant. Then in goes 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Mix that in. Then sprinkle on 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Mix that in. Then we're adding in 2.5 cups of beef broth and 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Give that a little mixy mix. In goes 2 bay leaves and a teaspoon of fresh thyme chopped and a teaspoon of fresh rosemary rosemary chopped. Stir that in and then let this simmer for about 5 minutes. After that, taste for seasonings and adjust to your liking. Then in goes half a cup of frozen peas and half a cup of frozen corn. Stir this in and then remove that from the heat. Now either add your filling to a baking dish, or if your skillet is oven proof, you can leave it in that. And then you're going to spread out your mashed potatoes over your cottage pie filling until everything is nice and smooth. Next, we're going to cover the top of this with some shredded cheese. Now this is optional, but I personally love the way this comes out with some shredded cheese over the top. The cheese gets all nice and bubbly and golden brown. I'm using a blend of sharp cheddar cheese and Vermont white cheddar cheese. Whatever cheese you decide to use, if any at all, you're going to want about half a cup. After all our cheese is on, we're baking this in a preheated 375-degree oven for about 30 minutes until that cheese on top is golden brown and bubbly. We're going to top this with a little bit of fresh chopped chives. And then very important, I want you to let this sit for about 10 minutes before you cut in and serve this. Trust me, your patience will be rewarded. You're going to give that gravy, that filling, time to thicken up. Everything is going to come together just beautifully. And let me tell you, this thing was amazing, just beautifully delicious. This is definitely going to make it into those steady rotation of meals that I make around here. All right, everyone, that's it for me. That's it for this video. That's it for me in this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and I'll see you in the next video. As a kid, I didn't have shepherd's pie very often. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe my mom thought us kids wouldn't be too crazy about the idea of eating lamb. And honestly, she was probably right. But as an adult, I can definitely get around the hype around this type of dish. Because at the end of the day, a good shepherd's pie really is comfort food. So let's go make it. So a good shepherd's pie is going to begin with ground or minced lamb, not beef. If you've seen my last video, which was the cottage pie video, you would know that a shepherd's pie is made with lamb and a cottage pie is usually made with beef or a mixture of beef and pork. I used beef, pork, and veal, which had a great flavor. So for this shepherd's pie, we're going to begin with about a pound of minced lamb into a pan that's going to be large enough to hold everything by the end of this recipe. We're going to start breaking that meat up a little bit. Then we're going to stop and we're going to add in some kosher salt, black pepper, and some paprika. Then continue browning and crumbling your lamb until it is no longer pink. And if you can hear all that noise in the background, my cat decided now would be a good time to play with his toys and act like a maniac. Once your lamb is cooked and crumbled, as you can see, there's a good bit of fat in the pan. So we're going to drain off, well, actually we're going to remove our meat, and then we're going to drain off about 90% of that fat. We're going to leave some of it, but most of it we're going to drain off. It's funny because every time I do one of these videos where I'm browning meat, there's always a bunch of people in the comments debating about whether you should drain the fat, leave the fat adds flavor, it's too greasy if you leave the fat, whether or not you should just keep cooking it down until the fat cooks down and the water evaporates. Me, I'm just going to make my life easier and drain off most of that fat. Once that fat is drained, we're going to add in some chopped celery, onions, and carrots. And we're going to add in just a tiny bit more salt, pepper, and paprika, which, you know, you should never be afraid to season little by little as you go along. In fact, they've done studies where they took two separate dishes, two identical dishes. One, they seasoned every step as they went along. And the second dish, they added the same amount of salt, but they added it all at once at the end. And the dish where they added all the salt in at the end, the same exact amount, it was just way too salty. Because, you know, when you season, when you salt as you go, the salt brings out the flavor of whatever you're cooking, intensifies it. Anyway, you're going to want to cook these vegetables for about 7 minutes until they're nice and brown and soft and tender. Then we're going to crush in about 2 to 3 garlic cloves, and we're going to mix that in and cook for about 1 minute until nice and fragrant. Then we're going to add in about 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Mix that in until you no longer see any white flour. Then I want you to cook this for about 1 minute. Then we're going to stir in 2.5 cups of beef broth and 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, and 2 bay leaves. Give that all a good mix so everything is combined. Then we're adding about a teaspoon of rosemary and a teaspoon of chopped thyme. Mix that in, then let this simmer and reduce for about 15 minutes until it is nice and thick. After about 15 minutes, go in and fish those bay leaves out. Then go ahead and add your cooked ground lamb back to the party. Then we're adding half a cup of frozen corn and half a cup of frozen peas. Give that a really good mix so everything is thoroughly combined, and there you go. That is our shepherd's pie filling. Next, we got to make our mashed potatoes. Now, if you already have a good mashed potato recipe or you don't want to see this, you can skip ahead to the baking directions. First thing we're going to do is make our garlic and chive mashed potatoes. Here, I got about 2 pounds of russet potatoes. Now, for mashed potatoes, I find the best potatoes is either going to be a russet potato or a Yukon Gold potato. Either way, you can't go wrong. I got a bowl full of cold water to place my potatoes in after we dice them, and I got a separate bowl to skin my potatoes into. And that's simply what we're doing first, is peeling the potatoes. Now, if you had, let's say, a potato ricer, you could just boil these whole with the skin on and then just twist and peel the skin off later. Pop the whole thing into the potato ricer and smash it out. I do do not have a potato ricer, so this is what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to start by peeling the potatoes until we got a nice smooth skinless potato, and we're going to cut our potatoes into mostly even chunks so that they can cook evenly. And we're adding our chopped potatoes to our bowl full of cold water as we chop them. And once you're done chopping your potatoes, you can see this bowl is full of starchy water. So to remove some of that starch, we're going to go ahead and rinse these potatoes a couple of times until that water is clear. I added my potatoes to a medium saucepan filled with fresh new cold water, and now we're going to add some things. First up, I'm going to add some dehydrated onions for a little bit of flavor, about a tablespoon. Then I'm adding a couple of bay leaves, a generous amount of kosher salt, and some cracked black pepper, about a tablespoon of each. Then I'm adding 2 cloves of garlic. Bring your potatoes to a boil. Cook for about 20 minutes until fork tender. Once your potatoes are fork tender, drain them. Then we're adding them to a large bowl to make mashing them a little bit easier. And the secret to a good mashed, plenty of butter and salt, but mostly butter. Now for this quantity of potatoes, I'm going to add about 1 stick of butter, which is about 8 tablespoons or half a cup. Now you might say that's a lot. You're right. If you say that's too much, you're wrong. Now, because I don't have a potato ricer and you might not either, the next best thing to get smooth potatoes is going to be this hand mixer. So to start, we're going to break up those potatoes, get that butter mixed in, but we're not done yet. We're going to add about a teaspoon of kosher salt and a teaspoon of cracked black pepper. That's just to start. We're going to taste it when we're done. If it needs more seasoning, we're going to add more seasoning. I've also had about a cup of milk heating on the stove. We're only going to add about a half a cup right now. Mix that in. If we need more of the milk, we'll add more of the milk. After a little bit of a mix, I am going to add about another 1/4 cup of our warm milk. Now, mashed potatoes is kind of like the perfect date. Everybody's going to have a preference. Do you like yours thick and stiff, smooth and creamy, loose and runny? But to truly know what's good, you got to get down and taste it. Mine needed just a touch more of seasoning. I'm adding a little bit more kosher salt, a little bit more cracked black pepper, and just a little bit, about 2 tablespoons of our warm milk. Another quick little mix. Then we're adding our mashed potatoes right on top to our shepherd's pie mixture. I just want to point out that I am baking mine right in this cast iron skillet, but if you don't have an oven proof skillet or pan, just follow all the same steps and then just add everything to a baking dish right before you bake it. Go ahead and smooth your mashed potatoes out to a nice thin layer or thick layer, just a flat layer. After that, you can go ahead and make a design if you want, something like I'm doing. But after that, we are baking this in a 375-degree oven for about 30 minutes. And then once this comes out of the oven, very important, you want to let this rest for at least 15, maybe even 20 minutes. If you were to like dig into it right now, it would just be a sloppy mess. And I mean, I know we all love a sloppy mess, but this ain't the time or the place, so let it rest. And once you let this thing rest, of course, it's time to dig in. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab a big old piece. And let me tell you, this was everything I wanted it to be, and then some, and then more. That lamb was delicious. It paired perfectly with everything, all the spices and vegetables, the mashed potatoes, nice and creamy. This has to make it into your weekly rotation of dinners. All right, everyone. Unfortunately, that's it for me. That's it for this video. That's it for me in this video. Like, comment, subscribe, send this video to a friend, and I'll see you in the next video. Growing up, one of my favorite meals that I would look forward to was corned beef and cabbage, especially around St. Patrick's Day. To walk in through the door after school and smell the corned beef and cabbage cooking on the stove was always a treat. And to me, there was never enough meat to go around. It was always the first thing gone. But I'm older now, a lot older, so let's see if we can make it as good as Mom did. The first thing you're gonna need is your corned beef brisket. Now you can get these at most grocery stores and supermarkets, and most of the time they will come with this little seasoning packet. If yours doesn't, I'll leave a recipe below, but most of the time it's just pickling season. So the first thing we're going to do is unwrap this, bring it over to the sink, and wash it down. Once your corned beef is all washed off, pat it dry, and then get out a large pot, something that's going to be able to hold at least 6 quarts of water. Corned beef goes in, grab your packet of seasonings that came with your corned beef and add that right in. Grab a few bay leaves and throw those in. You can also throw in any other seasonings or spices that you got or that you like chopped garlic, things like that. Then you want to add enough water so that your corned beef is fully covered, about 2 inches with water. I added about 8 cups of water. Bring your pot over to the stove, high heat, and you want to bring this up to a boil. Once your pot is at a rapid boil, turn down the heat to a simmer, cover this with a lid, and simmer for about 2 hours. Our corned beef has been simmering for almost 2 hours, so now we're going to get our vegetables ready. First thing we're going to do is our cabbage. Now, as far as the cabbage goes, the size and shape that you want to cut this in is really up to you. I mean, you could do shredded, you could do big chunks, small chunks, medium chunks. Me, I'm going to do some nice and medium cuts. You know, I want a nice sized piece of cabbage, and I think it'll look better for presentation wise too. Our 2-hour timer is up, so go ahead and add your cabbage to the pot. And I just want to point out the meat has about an hour left to cook, so that's how long the cabbage is going to cook also. I like my cabbage a little little bit more on the well done side. If you want your cabbage a little bit more firmer, you could put it in maybe 30, even 20 minutes when the meat has 30 or 20 minutes left. I also quartered a large onion, and we're going to throw that in there too now with the cabbage. Now this is going to cook for an hour total, but at the 30-minute mark, we're going to throw in some carrots. I'm going to do about 5. We're going to trim them, peel them, wash them, and then I'm just going to give them a nice size rough chop. Along with the carrots, we're doing 1 pound of mini yellow potatoes. If you don't have mini potatoes, feel free to cut regular potatoes into some medium chunks. 30 minutes is up, so we're going to add our carrots and potatoes, and then this is going to cook for a final 30 minutes. While our corned beef and vegetables finish cooking, we're going to make a sauce, a mayo and vinegar based sauce, which I think will go perfect with this. Aside from mustard, we always ate ours with mustard, but I think this sauce is also going to be a nice addition. We're going to add 1 cup of mayo. By the way, full recipe for everything, including this sauce, will be in the description. So if you're liking the video so far, hit it with a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and send this video to a friend. Next, 1/4 cup of vinegar and 1/4 cup apple cider vinegar. Add the juice from half a lemon, a teaspoon of horseradish, and a teaspoon of Dijon mustard, a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, about half a teaspoon of salt and pepper, 1 tablespoon of good old table sugar, and 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, although sometimes I call it Kanye pepper. Mix this up until everything is nice and creamy, and that is our sauce. After that last 30 minutes, take your meat out and let it rest for at least 20 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes. 15 would probably be good, but I'd go 20 minutes. And you can leave your vegetables in that broth if you want them to get even more tender, which is what I'm going to do. After you let your meat rest, go ahead and slice up that meat, thick or thin. It is your preference. I'm doing a little bit of both. And dinner is ready. That is our corned beef and cabbage, potatoes and carrots. I'm going to serve mine up with that sauce we made, a little bit of yellow mustard and some spicy Dijon mustard. And of course, what would some corned beef be without making a good old sandwich? I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow mustard, some of those onions from the pot, and then I'm piling that meat on nice, high, and thick. And then I'm topping it with some of that cabbage from the pot, although I really wish I had some sauerkraut. I love sauerkraut. And I'm being extra generous with the sauce. Top with our top piece of bread, and there you go. That's my little makeshift sandwich. Alright everyone, unfortunately that's it for me. That's it for this video. That's it for me in this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and let me know what you're going to be watching when you eat your corned beef and cabbage. Luck of the Irish or the leprechaun?